The text message glared back at Sloane Calloway like an accusation. "You idiot! You switched the cups!" Her hand trembled as she stared at Wesley's phone, the bathroom shower still running in the background. Her suspicions hadn't been paranoia after all. For months, she'd been systematically poisoned by the woman she thought would one day be her sister-in-law. And apparently, Wesley had known all along. Sloane carefully placed the phone back exactly as she'd found it on the coffee table, her heart hammering against her ribs. She moved to the window of Brielle's luxurious apartment, trying to steady her breathing before Wesley finished his shower. Outside, the city twinkled with evening lights, oblivious to the horrifying revelation that had just turned her world upside down. Just 3 hours earlier, she had made a split-second decision that saved her life and exposed a sinister plot. The dinner at Brielle's had begun like their usual Sunday visits. Sloane had accepted the customary after-dinner coffee with a smile that masked her suspicion. For 5 months now, she'd been experiencing mysterious symptoms after these visits: severe stomach cramps, dizziness, blurred vision, and once, a terrifying episode where she'd nearly lost consciousness driving home. Her doctor had been baffled until blood tests revealed traces of a substance that had no business being in her system. "The coffee smells wonderful," Sloane had commented, watching Brielle's perfectly manicured hands as she set down the red cup before her. The same red cup Sloane was always given, while everyone else had varied colors. That detail hadn't escaped her notice. "It's a special Guatemalan blend," Brielle had replied with that tight smile that never quite reached her eyes. "I know how much you appreciate good coffee." When both Brielle and Wesley stepped away to retrieve dessert, Sloane had made her move, a quick switch of the cups, the red one for Brielle's blue one, and she sat back, heart racing but expression neutral. When they returned, neither noticed. Sloane pretended to sip from the blue cup, watching over the rim as Brielle drank deeply from the red one, commenting on the perfect sweetness. Within 30 minutes, Brielle had excused herself, complaining of sudden nausea. The irony wasn't lost on Sloane, who had suffered the same symptoms for months after their Sunday gatherings. An hour later, Wesley had suggested they leave, mentioning that his sister wasn't feeling well. And now, back at Wesley's apartment, the damning text message confirmed everything. Sloane's mind raced through every moment of their 14-month relationship. Wesley Thorne had entered her life shortly after her grandmother's passing, a chance meeting at a charity gala that had seemed like fate at the time. Handsome, attentive, and apparently successful in real estate development, he'd swept her off her feet with grand gestures and intense devotion. She'd been vulnerable after losing the only family she had left, and Wesley had been there to catch her. The introduction to his sister Brielle had come 3 months into their relationship. "We're incredibly close," he'd explained. "Our parents died when we were young, and we've only had each other since then." Sloane had admired their bond, having grown up with only her grandmother after losing her parents in a car accident when she was 7. She desperately wanted to be accepted by Brielle, to find family again. Staring at her reflection in Brielle's window, Sloane hardly recognized herself. The vibrant woman with ambitious plans for her grandmother's technology company had been reduced to a pale, frequently ill shadow. Her once lustrous hair had begun to thin, and dark circles had become permanent features under her eyes. Doctors had suggested stress, grief, or an autoimmune condition. Not poison. Never poison. The water shut off in the bathroom. Sloane composed herself, sliding onto the couch and picking up a magazine as if she'd been casually reading all along. Her mind, however, was calculating furiously. The inheritance from her grandmother, $47 million and controlling interest in Calloway Tech, had made her a target. With no living relatives, if something happened to her, who would inherit? The question chilled her to the bone. "You look deep in thought," Wesley said, emerging from the bathroom with a towel around his waist, water droplets still clinging to his chest. His smile, once charming, now seemed predatory to Sloane. "Just tired," she replied, forcing a weak smile. think I might be coming down with something." "Again?" Wesley frowned, but Sloane caught the flash of something in his eyes. Impatience? Concern? Calculation? "Maybe you should see a different doctor. The one you're seeing clearly isn't helping." "Maybe you're right," Sloane murmured, playing along. "Though I felt fine until after dinner at Brielle's." Wesley's expression didn't change, but she noticed his shoulders tense slightly. "Coincidence, I'm sure. You've been working too hard since taking over your grandmother's company. Stress manifests physically, you know." Sloane nodded absently, her mind already racing ahead. If they were poisoning her slowly, there must be a reason they hadn't simply killed her outright. She needed time. Time to understand the full scope of their plan. Time to gather evidence. Time to ensure they wouldn't get away with it. "I think I'll sleep at my place tonight," she said carefully. "I have an early meeting tomorrow, and all my files are there." A flicker of annoyance crossed Wesley's face before he masked it with concern. "You sure? You don't look well. I'd feel better if you stayed here so I could keep an eye on you." The thought made her skin crawl. "That's sweet, but I'll be fine. Besides, you said you have that breakfast meeting with investors in the morning. I don't want to disturb you." Sadie. As she gathered her things, Sloane maintained a calm facade, while her mind catalogued everything she needed to do. First, preserve the evidence. She'd taken photos of the text message while Wesley was in the shower. Second, find legal help, someone not connected to either of them. Third, understand exactly what they were planning. "I'll call you tomorrow," Wesley said, kissing her cheek at the door. His lips felt like acid against her skin. "Looking forward to it," she lied, wondering if her voice sounded as hollow as she felt. In her car, with the doors locked, Sloane finally allowed herself a moment of pure, unadulterated terror. Tears burned her eyes as the betrayal sank in. The man she'd thought she might marry and his sister had been slowly poisoning her, playing a long game that could only have one ending: her death. She wiped away her tears with shaking hands. Fear wouldn't save her. Intelligence would. Resources would. And she had both in abundance. By the time Sloane reached her downtown penthouse, she had outlined a plan. Rather than confronting Wesley or going immediately to the police with what might be dismissed as circumstantial evidence, she would play along. She would pretend ignorance while gathering irrefutable proof. Entering her home, she immediately activated the security system, then methodically swept for any surveillance devices Wesley might have planted during his many visits. Finding none, she sat at her computer and began searching for the best attorney in the city, someone with experience in criminal cases involving fraud and attempted murder. Yvette Dunham's name appeared repeatedly in her search results. A formidable attorney with 20 years of experience and a reputation for being meticulously thorough, she specialized in high-profile cases involving wealthy clients. Perfect. Sloane sent an urgent email requesting an appointment for a confidential matter of life and death the following morning, offering to pay triple Yvette's usual consultation fee for immediate attention. Then she turned to her medical symptoms, researching possible poisons that could cause her specific reactions. The list was disturbingly long. Sleep eluded her that night. Every creak in her luxury apartment made her start. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. By morning, dark circles underscored her eyes, but her resolve had hardened into steel. Wearing a recording device she'd purchased from her company's security division months ago for an unrelated matter, Sloane headed to Yvette Dunham's office, prepared to share her chilling suspicions. "Ms. Calloway," Yvette greeted her, rising from behind an imposing desk, in an office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. In her mid-40s, with sharp eyes and an immaculate gray suit, she exuded competence and discretion. "Your email was intriguing, to say the least. How can I help you today?" Sloane took a deep breath. "I believe my boyfriend and his sister are systematically poisoning me to gain control of my inheritance," she said, the words sounding almost absurd spoken aloud. and I need your help to prove it before they succeed in killing me." To her credit, Yvette's expression remained professionally neutral, though her eyes narrowed slightly. "That's a serious accusation, Ms. Calloway. Do you have any evidence to support this claim?" Sloane removed her phone and pulled up the photograph of the damning text message. "This is just the beginning," she said, placing the phone on Yvette's desk, "and I'm prepared to collect much more." Yvette Dunham studied the text message carefully, her expression revealing nothing. After what felt like an eternity to Sloane, the attorney placed the phone down and leaned back in her chair. "This is compelling, but not conclusive," she said finally. "A good defense attorney could argue that this message referred to something else entirely. We need more." "I'm prepared to get more," Sloane replied, determination hardening her voice. "Whatever it takes." Yvette's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing her new client. "Ms. Calloway, what you're describing, systematic poisoning by someone close to you, is exceptionally dangerous. Have you considered simply breaking up with Wesley and obtaining a restraining order? If I do that, they'll just find another way. Or worse, they'll disappear with whatever they've already managed to take." Sloane leaned forward. "My grandmother built Calloway Tech from nothing. She left it to me because she believed I could protect her legacy. I won't just run away." Something shifted in Yvette's expression. "Respect, perhaps." She nodded once, decisively. "Then we need to build an airtight case. First, we need medical evidence. Do you have the results of your previous tests?" "Yes, but they're inconclusive. The doctors found unusual substances but couldn't determine the source. We'll need new tests, specifically looking for toxins. I know a toxicologist who consults for criminal cases, Dr. Howard Littman. He's discreet and thorough." Yvette wrote down a name and address on a business card. "Tell him I sent you, and explain everything. He'll know what to test for." Sloane took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. "Second," Yvette continued, "we need to document a pattern. How often do these episodes occur after visiting Brielle's home?" "Every time, without fail." "Good. I mean, not good that you're being poisoned, but good that there's a clear pattern. We'll need to prove it." Yvette tapped her pen against the desk. "Do you think you can manage one more visit, wearing a recording device and taking a sample of whatever they serve you?" The thought made Sloane's stomach clench with fear, but she nodded. "Yes, Sunday dinners at Brielle's are a tradition now. I'm expected to be there in 4 days." "Perfect. My investigator, Malcolm, will provide you with recording equipment and sample collection tools. Small, undetectable vials that look like ordinary items. A lipstick, perhaps." She picked up her phone. "In the meantime, I'm going to bring in Detective Declan Moss. He's with Major Crimes, and more importantly, he owes me several favors. We'll need law enforcement involved, but carefully." 3 hours later, Sloane sat in a sterile examination room as Dr. Howard Littman, a slender man with wire-rimmed glasses and methodical movements, drew several vials of blood. "Yvette explained your situation," he said quietly, labeling each sample. "I'll be testing for a comprehensive panel of toxins, particularly those that can cause cumulative damage without immediate detection. Heavy metals, certain plant-based poisons, antifreeze components, substances that an amateur might access." "How soon will you know?" Sloane asked, rolling down her sleeve. "I'll expedite the analysis. 2 days, possibly 3. He hesitated. "Ms. Calloway, if you're correct about being systematically poisoned, you should know that some of these substances can cause permanent damage. You should consider hospitalization under a different name while this investigation proceeds." "I can't," Sloane shook her head. "If I disappear suddenly, they'll know something's wrong. They might destroy evidence or flee." Dr. Littman frowned but nodded. "Then, at minimum, don't consume anything in their presence. Fake it if you must." That evening, Wesley called, his voice warm with concern that now sounded hollow to Sloane's ears. "How are you feeling, babe? Any better?" "A little," she lied, staring out her penthouse window. I saw another doctor today. Really? What did they say? She could hear the subtle tension in his voice. Alarm? Worry that she might discover the truth? Nothing conclusive. More tests. She forced lightness into her tone. Probably just stress, like you said. You work too hard, Wesley replied, the relief in his voice barely perceptible. Listen, I was thinking, after Brielle's dinner on Sunday, why don't we take a little trip? Just the two of us. You could use a break from everything. A chill ran down Sloane's spine. A trip would isolate her, make her more vulnerable. That sounds wonderful, she said, amazed at how normal her voice sounded. Where were you thinking? My family has a cabin upstate, very private. No internet, no cell service, total disconnection. Just what the doctor ordered. No witnesses, no way to call for help, Sloane translated mentally. It sounds perfect. I'd love to see it. After ending the call, she immediately phoned Yvette. He wants to take me to an isolated cabin after Sunday's dinner, she reported, pacing her living room. No communication, no witnesses. This accelerates our timeline, Yvette replied, her voice tense. I'm meeting with Detective Moss tomorrow morning. Come to my office at 9. We need to coordinate. The following morning, Sloane met Detective Declan Moss, a weathered man with salt and pepper hair and eyes that seemed to absorb every detail of her appearance and demeanor. Ms. Calloway, he said, his handshake firm. I've reviewed the information Attorney Dunham provided. I understand your reluctance to file an official report yet, but you should know that what you're proposing, continuing to expose yourself to potential poison, is extremely dangerous. I understand the risks, Sloane replied, but we need concrete evidence. You said so yourself. Detective Moss exchanged glances with Yvette. We've dealt with poisoning cases before. They're notoriously difficult to prove, especially when the suspected poisoner is careful. And from what you've described, these two are careful. But not careful enough, Sloane countered, pulling out her phone. I've been researching Wesley and Brielle. There are inconsistencies in their background. He showed them a series of news articles and social media posts she'd compiled overnight. They claim their parents died when they were young, leaving them only each other. But I found an obituary for a Margaret Thorne from 5 years ago that mentions her loving children, Wesley and Brielle. And there's more. Wesley told me he attended Princeton, but there's no record of him in any alumni database. Detective Moss leaned forward, suddenly more interested. Fraudulent backgrounds often indicate larger criminal patterns. I'll run complete background checks on both of them. He studied Sloane. What else have you discovered about your boyfriend, Ms. Calloway? He supposedly runs a successful real estate development company. But when I searched property records, I could only find 2 small projects completed in the last 3 years. Nothing that would support his apparent lifestyle. Follow the money, Yvette murmured. Classic. I want to look at your financial records, Detective Moss said. All of them. Personal accounts, business holdings, everything. If they're after your money, there may already be evidence of financial manipulation. Sloane hesitated only briefly before nodding. I'll authorize my accountant to provide everything. By that afternoon, a disturbing picture had emerged. Small but consistent transfers had been moving from Sloane's accounts to offshore holdings for the past 6 months. Nothing large enough to trigger alerts, but cumulatively significant. More alarming were the changes to her investment portfolio, redirecting funds through increasingly complex channels that all seemed to eventually connect to shell companies with hidden ownership. He's been skimming, Detective Moss confirmed, spreading financial documents across Yvette's conference table. Sophisticated but detectable. And there's something else, a new will, filed with Burton and Associates 3 months ago. Sloane frowned. I don't have a new will. Mine is with Greenberg Law, established after my grandmother died. Exactly. This appears to be fraudulent. It names Wesley Thorne as your primary beneficiary in the event of your death. Burton and Associates is a small firm specializing in estate planning. They claim you appeared in person with identification. Identity theft! Yvette said grimly. Probably using your personal documents to hire an imposter. Sloane felt dizzy, gripping the edge of the table. So their plan is, to poison me slowly, drain my accounts in the meantime, and then ensure Wesley inherits everything when I die. It appears so, Detective Moss agreed. And the cabin trip suggests they may be accelerating their timeline. The results from Dr. Littman arrived late that evening, traces of arsenic and digitalis, a heart-affecting compound found in foxglove plants. Both poisons, administered in small doses over time, could cause symptoms matching Sloane's, and eventually prove fatal while potentially appearing natural, especially in someone presumed to be under significant stress. By Saturday, the team had assembled their strategy. Sloane would attend Brielle's Sunday dinner, wearing sophisticated recording equipment and carrying specialized collection vials disguised as makeup. Detective Moss and his team would maintain surveillance outside, ready to intervene if necessary. Most importantly, Sloane would not consume anything, instead employing sleight of hand and distraction techniques Malcolm had taught her. Remember, Yvette cautioned during their final preparation meeting, our goal is evidence collection, not confrontation. No matter what you discover, maintain your composure. Act normal. What about the cabin trip? Sloane asked. I can't avoid it without raising suspicions. We'll have a tracking device on you, Detective Moss assured her, and a team will follow at a distance. If they take you there, we'll have probable cause for a welfare check. That night, alone in her penthouse, Sloane stood before her mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. Beneath the signs of stress and illness was a determination she'd inherited from her grandmother, the woman who had built an empire from nothing, who had taught Sloane that true strength came from facing challenges head-on. I won't let them win, he whispered to her reflection. Not just for me, but for you, Grandma. Sunday arrived with painful slowness. Sloane dressed carefully, selecting an outfit that would conceal the recording equipment while appearing normal. A flowing blouse over slim pants with a light jacket. She applied her makeup with shaking hands, reminding herself that she had faced boardroom battles and corporate takeover attempts. She could handle dinner with the people plotting her death. Wesley picked her up at 4 o'clock, greeting her with a kiss that felt like acid against her cheek. You look better today, he observed, his eyes assessing her. The new doctor must be helping. I feel stronger, Sloane replied, allowing a hint of genuine emotion into her voice. It wasn't a lie. Knowledge had given her strength. Brielle's apartment gleamed with the same polished perfection as always. Crystal glasses caught the late afternoon sunlight, casting rainbow prisms across immaculate surfaces. Everything beautiful, everything deadly. Sloane, darling. Brielle embraced her, the expensive perfume cloying. Wesley says you've been unwell again. Such a delicate constitution you have. I'm feeling much better today, Sloane replied, returning the embrace while fighting her instinct to recoil. Looking forward to dinner. Brielle smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. I've prepared your favorite coffee for afterward. A special blend, just for you. I can't wait, Sloane replied, forcing warmth into her smile while her stomach twisted with dread. Your coffee is always so distinctive. Dinner progressed with excruciating slowness. Sloane performed the elaborate dance Malcolm had taught her, appearing to eat while discreetly disposing of food in her napkin, pretending to sip wine while actually letting it barely touch her lips. All the while, she maintained pleasant conversation, laughing at Wesley's stories and complimenting Brielle's cooking. The salmon is delicious, she lied, having placed a forkful into her napkin when Brielle turned to retrieve more sauce. You'll have to give me the recipe. Family secret, Brielle responded with a tight smile. Perhaps after you and Wesley make things official. Wesley reached across the table, taking Sloane's hand in his. The touch that once made her heart race now made her skin crawl. Speaking of making things official, he began, his eyes watching her carefully, I've been thinking a lot about our future, Sloane. A warning bell sounded in her mind. This wasn't part of the expected script for the evening. She maintained her expression, squeezing his hand affectionately. Have you now? I have. His thumb caressed her wrist, right over her pulse point. Was he checking her reaction? But let's save that conversation for after coffee. Brielle has prepared something special. As if on cue, Brielle rose and began clearing plates. Why don't you two relax in the living room? I'll bring coffee in a moment. Sloane followed Wesley to the plush seating area, her mind racing. The recording equipment was capturing everything, but she needed a sample of whatever they planned to serve her. She excused herself to use the restroom, deliberately taking a wrong turn toward the kitchen instead. Brielle stood at the counter, her back to the doorway, pouring coffee into 3 cups, 2 black ceramic mugs, and 1 familiar red cup. As Sloane watched, Brielle removed a small amber bottle from her pocket and carefully added several drops to the red cup, stirring thoroughly. Need any help? Sloane called out, pretending she'd just arrived. Brielle startled, nearly dropping the bottle before quickly pocketing it. Sloane, you scared me. Her laugh sounded brittle. No need. I was just adding a bit of cinnamon to yours. I know how you like it. How thoughtful, Sloane replied, maintaining her pleasant expression while her heart hammered against her ribs. I'll just freshen up before coffee. In the bathroom, with shaking hands, Sloane activated the secondary recording device focused specifically on conversations about beverages or food. Everything was being documented. Now she just needed to execute the final part of the plan, obtaining a sample without consuming any of the poisoned coffee. When she returned to the living room, Wesley was arranging something on the coffee table. A small velvet box placed prominently beside a champagne bottle in an ice bucket. Sloane's blood ran cold. This wasn't just another poisoning attempt. This was the end game. There you are, Wesley smiled, patting the sofa beside him. Brielle's bringing coffee, and then I have something important to ask you. Sloane's mind worked furiously. A proposal would complicate everything. If she accepted, she'd be committing to extended contact with her would-be murderers. If she refused, she might trigger an accelerated timeline for their plans. Brielle entered carrying a tray with the 3 cups. As expected, she handed Sloane the red one. Thank you, Sloane said, accepting it with a smile. It smells wonderful. A special blend, as promised. Brielle replied, her eyes watching intently as Sloane raised the cup to her lips. Sloane pretended to sip, using the technique Malcolm had taught her, pressing the cup against closed lips while tilting it slightly, creating the illusion of drinking. Delicious, she murmured, setting the cup down. Wesley seemed satisfied, exchanging a quick glance with his sister before reaching for the velvet box. Sloane, these past 14 months have been the happiest of my life, he began, his voice taking on a practiced sincerity that now rang hollow to her ears. You've become everything to me. He slid from the sofa to one knee, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring. Large enough to be impressive, but not so ostentatious as to seem suspicious to someone of Sloane's wealth. Will you make me the happiest man alive and become my wife? The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Sloane thought of the evidence they'd gathered, the financial trails, the fraudulent will, the poisoning attempts documented by Dr. Littman's tests. It wasn't enough yet. They needed this final piece, the sample from the red cup and, ideally, a confession. Wesley, she breathed, infusing her voice with emotion. This is so unexpected. His expression flickered briefly. Impatience? Concern that she might refuse? But welcome, I hope, he pressed, still holding the ring. Sloane made a show of taking another sip from the red cup, watching as both siblings relaxed slightly when she did. Before I answer, she said carefully, I'd like to make a toast. The new beginnings. Wesley's brow furrowed slightly. We should open the champagne for that, don't you think? In a moment, Sloane turned to Brielle. You've been such an important part of our relationship. I'd like you to be part of this moment, too. Confusion crossed Brielle's features, but she nodded, lifting her coffee cup in response. Sloane raised her red cup, then paused. "Actually," she said, "since this is such a special moment, why don't we switch cups? In my family, it's a tradition. Sharing drinks symbolizes sharing futures." The siblings exchanged a panicked glance that lasted a fraction of a second, but was unmistakable. "That's not necessary," Brielle said quickly. "Your cup has the cinnamon you like." "I insist," Sloane said firmly, already extending her cup toward Brielle. "It would mean so much to me." Wesley intervened, his voice tight. "Sloane, darling, let's just open the champagne instead." "Not until I've finished my coffee," Sloane replied, still holding her cup toward Brielle. "It's too delicious to waste. Unless there's some reason you don't want a drink from my cup, Brielle?" The tension in the room thickened. Brielle's smile became fixed, her eyes darting to Wesley for guidance. "Of course not," Brielle finally said, reaching for Sloane's cup with visible reluctance. "If it means that much to you." The exchange was made, Sloane now holding Brielle's untainted coffee, Brielle holding the poisoned red cup. Neither drank. "Well?" Wesley prompted, still kneeling. The ring extended. His voice had taken on an edge. "What's your answer, Sloane?" Sloane took a genuine sip from the safe cup, then placed it carefully on the table. "Before I answer," she said, "I'd like to know exactly what's in my original cup, the red one that Brielle is now holding." The room went still. Wesley slowly rose from his kneeling position, the charming facade falling away. "What kind of question is that?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "A simple one," Sloane replied evenly. "What's in the cup, beyond coffee and cinnamon?" Brielle set the red cup down with a sharp click against the saucer. "I don't know what you're implying, but it's offensive." "Is it?" Sloane reached into her jacket pocket and removed her phone, displaying the photograph of the damning text message from days earlier. "As offensive as this, perhaps?" The color drained from Wesley's face as he recognized his sister's text on his own phone. His hand shot out, grabbing Sloane's wrist with bruising force. "Where did you get that?" "You should be more careful about leaving your phone unattended," Sloane replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Especially when you're plotting murder." Brielle stood abruptly. "This is absurd. Wesley, she's clearly unstable." "Am I?" Sloane challenged, pulling her wrist free from Wesley's grip. "Then drink from the red cup, Brielle. Right now. All of it. I don't have to—" "Drink it!" Sloane demanded, her voice rising for the first time. "If it's just coffee and cinnamon, prove it." Wesley's expression had transformed entirely, the mask of affection replaced by cold calculation. "You've been going through my phone," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Looking for what, exactly?" "Evidence," Sloane replied, "of why I've been mysteriously ill after every visit here, of where my money has been disappearing to, of who filed a fraudulent will in my name." Brielle's sharp intake of breath was telling. Wesley shot her a warning look before turning back to Sloane. "You're confused, darling," he said, his tone shifting to concern, though his eyes remained cold. "You've been under tremendous stress since taking over your grandmother's company. It's affecting your judgment." "Is it affecting the toxicology reports too?" Sloane countered. "The ones showing arsenic and digitalis in my system? Interesting how those levels spike after our Sunday dinners." Wesley's expression hardened. "You've been investigating us." "Yes. For how long?" "Long enough." Sloane stood, putting distance between herself and the siblings. "Long enough to document the financial trails, the falsified documents, the poison. Long enough to know that your plan was to marry me, then kill me, make it my death appear natural, while you inherited everything." Wesley and Brielle exchanged another glance, some silent communication passing between them. The pretense was crumbling, but Sloane needed more, needed them to incriminate themselves explicitly for the recording. "You have no proof," Brielle said finally, her voice cold. "Nothing that would stand up in court." "Don't I?" Sloane gestured to the red cup, That coffee contains enough evidence to put you both away for attempted murder. And I suspect if police search your apartment, they'll find the rest." Wesley moved with unexpected speed, grabbing Sloane's arm and yanking her toward him. "You're not leaving with that cup," he growled, his charming facade completely gone. "You've become a liability, Sloane. Such a shame. We could have had a few good years together before your unfortunate decline." "Let go of me," Sloane demanded, struggling against his grip. "Or what?" he sneered. "You'll call for help? No one knows you're here." Sloane smiled then, a cold, confident expression that made Wesley falter momentarily. "Are you certain about that?" As if on cue, her phone buzzed with an incoming call, Yvette's name flashing on the screen. Wesley's grip loosened in surprise, giving Sloane the opportunity to wrench free. "It's over," she told them both. "Everything you've said in the past 10 minutes has been recorded. Detective Moss has been listening to our entire conversation." "You're bluffing," Brielle hissed, but her voice wavered. "Am I?" Sloane unbuttoned the top of her blouse just enough to reveal the edge of the recording device. "This connects directly to the police surveillance van outside. They've heard everything, including your reluctance to drink from the cup you prepared for me." Wesley's expression darkened with fury. "You stupid bitch," he snarled, lunging for her. Sloane dodged, knocking the coffee table over in the process. The red cup shattered on the floor, its poisoned contents seeping into Brielle's expensive carpet. "The evidence!" Brielle cried out, her composure finally breaking. "One sample lost," Sloane acknowledged, backing toward the door. "But Dr. Littman has been analyzing my blood for weeks, and I'm wearing a second recording device that captured you adding drops to my cup in the kitchen, Brielle." Wesley changed tactics, his expression suddenly desperate. "Sloane, listen to me. This isn't what it looks like. We can explain everything." "Save it for your attorney," Sloane replied, her hand finding the doorknob behind her. "You'll need a good one." "You're not walking out of here," Wesley threatened, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "If I'm going down, you're coming with me." He lunged again, faster this time. His fingers closed around Sloane's throat, squeezing with terrifying strength. Spots danced before her eyes as she clawed at his hands, fighting for breath. The door burst open behind her, slamming into Wesley and breaking his grip. Detective Moss rushed in, weapon drawn, followed by 2 uniformed officers. "Wesley Thorne, Brielle Thorne," he announced, his voice ringing with authority. "You're under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and criminal conspiracy." Sloane sagged against the wall, gasping for air as the officers handcuffed the siblings. Wesley's face contorted with rage, while Brielle had gone completely blank, her sophisticated facade crumbling into shock. "You've ruined everything," Wesley spat as the officer led him away. "Everything?" "No," Sloane replied hoarsely, rubbing her bruised throat. "You did that all by yourself." Outside, in the safety of Detective Moss's car, Sloane finally allowed herself to tremble, the full weight of what had nearly happened crashing over her. She had nearly married a man who had been systematically poisoning her, who had seen her only as a means to wealth, who had been planning her death with cold precision. "You did well in there," Detective Moss said, passing her a bottle of water. "We got everything on tape, the poisoned coffee, their reactions to being confronted, Wesley's assault. Combined with the financial evidence and Dr. Littman's toxicology reports, they're looking at significant prison time." Sloane nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Part physical from Wesley's attack, part emotional from the magnitude of the betrayal. "We'll need you to come to the station to make a formal statement," he continued, his voice gentler than she'd heard it before. "Attorney Dunham is already on her way there." As the police car pulled away from Brielle's building, Sloane watched the place where she had nearly lost everything recede in the window. 14 months of her life invested in a relationship built entirely on calculation and deceit. Yet somehow, she felt not defeat, but a fierce triumph. They had underestimated her, mistaking her kindness for weakness, her trust for naivety. They hadn't counted on the steel at her core, the legacy of determination her grandmother had instilled in her. They certainly hadn't expected her to turn their own trap against them. The red cup that had been meant as her undoing had become their downfall instead. The fluorescent lights of the police station cast harsh shadows across the interview room where Sloane sat, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of untainted coffee. Her voice had grown hoarse from repeating her statement, detailing each poisoning incident, explaining the financial discrepancies, describing the elaborate scheme Wesley and Brielle had constructed. "Just a few more questions, Ms. Calloway," Detective Moss said, his pen moving steadily across his notepad. "When did you first begin to suspect something was wrong?" Sloane traced the rim of her cup with her finger, thinking back to the first subtle warnings she'd dismissed. "About 3 months ago. I noticed I was only getting sick after visiting Brielle's apartment. At first, I thought it might be an allergic reaction to something in her home. A cleaning product, perhaps. But the symptoms became progressively worse, and the timing was too consistent to be coincidence. And the financial irregularities? I discovered those only last week, after finding the text message. I've always been hands-on with my company, but I delegated some personal financial management after my grandmother died." Her expression hardened. "That won't happen again." Detective Moss nodded, making another note. "Based on our preliminary investigation, they've been planning this for at least a year." "Wesley's previous identity?" "Previous identity?" Sloane interrupted, her attention sharpening. "Yes, Wesley Thorne isn't his real name. Fingerprint analysis identified him as Eric Caldwell, wanted in 3 states for similar schemes: identity theft, fraud, elder abuse. Never attempted murder before, though. You represent a significant escalation in his criminal pattern." The revelation shouldn't have shocked her after everything else, but Sloane felt the impact like a physical blow. The man she had loved, believed she had loved, was literally not who he claimed to be. And Brielle? Not his sister. Dental records identify her as Vanessa Mercer, his longtime accomplice and romantic partner. They've used the sibling ruse before. It creates a plausible reason for her presence, while eliminating potential jealousy as a motive if something happens to their mark. Romantic partners. The coffee churned in Sloane's stomach. All those Sunday dinners, watching Wesley and Brielle interact with apparent sibling affection, while behind closed doors, they were lovers plotting her death. The interview continued for another hour, pausing only when Yvette arrived, bringing with her a change of clothes for Sloane and a determined energy that filled the small room. "They're being held without bail," she informed Sloane, satisfaction evident in her voice. "The evidence is overwhelming. The district attorney is personally overseeing the case." "Have they said anything?" Sloane asked. Detective Moss exchanged glances with Yvette. "They're not cooperating, but they've turned on each other. Brielle, Vanessa, is claiming Wesley was the mastermind. He's saying she was responsible for the poisoning while he only handled the financial aspects. Classic criminal behavior," Yvette added. "Once caught, they sacrifice each other to save themselves." By midnight, Sloane was finally cleared to leave. Exhaustion pulled at her like a physical weight, making her movements sluggish and her thoughts fuzzy. Yvette insisted on escorting her home, arranging for additional security at her building. "You should consider relocating temporarily," Yvette suggested as they rode the elevator to Sloane's penthouse. "Their network might be larger than we currently know." "No," Sloane replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I won't be driven from my home. Not by them, not by fear." Yvette studied her for a moment, then nodded in approval. "At least accept the security detail for a few weeks. For my peace of mind, if nothing else." Sloane agreed, too tired to argue further. Inside her penthouse, with the doors locked and security systems armed, she stood motionless in the center of her living room, suddenly uncertain what to do next. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the confrontation and its aftermath was fading, leaving a hollow emptiness in its wake. Her gaze fell on a framed photograph on the mantel, herself with her grandmother at Callaway Tech's headquarters, both smiling widely after closing a major acquisition. Strength and determination radiated from her grandmother's posture, mirrored in Sloane's own stance beside her. "I did it, Grandma," she whispered to the empty room. "I protected what you built. I protected myself." The tears came then, not gentle weeping but harsh, racking sobs that bent her double. She cried for the relationship that had never existed, for the trust that had been so callously exploited, for the months of illness and fear, and most of all, for her own blindness to the danger that had been beside her all along. When the storm finally passed, Sloane straightened, wiping her face with trembling hands. She was alive. She had survived not just the poisoning, but the betrayal, and she would rebuild her health, her confidence, her life, just as her grandmother had taught her. 3 months passed with agonizing slowness. Sloane threw herself into her work, finding solace in the familiar challenges of running Callaway Tech. The company had suffered during her illness, with competitors gaining ground and key projects falling behind schedule. Now, with her strength returning and her mind clear, she worked relentlessly to reverse the damage. Physical recovery proved more complicated than anticipated. The toxicology report revealed that the long-term poisoning had affected her liver function and damaged her peripheral nerves, resulting in occasional numbness in her hands and feet. Dr. Littman assured her that most effects would fade with time and proper treatment, but some damage might be permanent. "You're fortunate," he told her during a follow-up appointment. "The doses were carefully calculated to cause gradual decline without raising immediate alarms. If you hadn't discovered the plot when you did, the outcome would have been very different." The criminal case progressed steadily. Wesley and Brielle, Eric and Vanessa, remained in custody, their attorneys making increasingly desperate motions that were systematically denied by the judge. The evidence against them was overwhelming. The recorded confession, the toxicology reports, the financial paper trail, and most damning of all, a journal found in a hidden compartment in Brielle's apartment detailing their entire scheme, including precise dosages and expected timelines for Sloane's deterioration. "Some criminals can't resist documenting their brilliance," Detective Moss explained when he called with updates. "Narcissism is a powerful weakness we can exploit." The investigation had expanded, uncovering 3 previous victims across different states, wealthy individuals who had died under mysterious circumstances after becoming romantically involved with either Wesley or Brielle. In each case, the surviving partner had inherited substantial assets before disappearing. "You're their first failure," Yvette noted during a case preparation meeting, "and likely their last. With multiple murder charges across several jurisdictions, they're facing life sentences without possibility of parole." Public interest in the case intensified as details emerged. Reporters camped outside Sloane's building and Callaway Tech's headquarters, shouting questions and thrusting microphones toward her whenever she appeared. Business publications speculated about the impact on the company's stability. Tabloids constructed lurid narratives about the Black Widow couple and their billionaire target. Sloane weathered the attention with as much grace as she could muster, issuing a single statement through Callaway Tech's press office. "I am grateful to law enforcement for their diligence in this matter and look forward to justice being served. My focus remains on my health and my company's continued success." Privately, however, the constant scrutiny wore on her. She found herself jumping at unexpected sounds, double-checking her food and drink even in her own home, startling awake from nightmares in which Wesley's hands closed around her throat, while Brielle watched with that cold, calculating smile. Dr. Anna Reynolds, the therapist Yvette had recommended, became a crucial support during these difficult months. "What you're experiencing is normal," she assured Sloane during their weekly sessions. "You survived a profound betrayal by someone you trusted intimately. Recovery isn't linear. There will be setbacks, moments of progress, and everything in between." "I feel so foolish," Sloane admitted during one particularly difficult session. Looking back, there were so many warning signs. How did I not see them? They were professionals, Dr. Reynolds reminded her. They selected their targets carefully and crafted their personas specifically to appeal to them. In your case, they exploited your grief over losing your grandmother and your desire for family connection. Still, Sloane persisted, a part of me knew something was wrong. I ignored that instinct, and yet, when the evidence became clear, you acted decisively. You didn't deny or rationalize, you investigated. That showed tremendous courage and self-trust. Gradually, Sloane began to rebuild her life. She implemented comprehensive security protocols for both her personal and professional activities. She reviewed and reorganized her financial structures with a team of trusted advisors. She reconnected with friends she had neglected during her relationship with Wesley, finding comfort in these genuine connections. 4 months after the arrests, as summer faded into early autumn, Yvette called with unexpected news. "Wesley wants to meet with you." Sloane's hand tightened around her phone. "Why would I agree to that?" "You shouldn't," Yvette replied bluntly. "There's nothing to gain, but his attorney claims he has information that might bring you closure before the trial." "It's manipulation," Sloane said immediately. "Another attempt to control the situation." "Almost certainly," Yvette agreed. "I'm only telling you because I promised to keep you fully informed. The prosecution has already denied the request." That night, Sloane dreamed of Wesley. Not the monster who had tried to kill her, but the man she thought she had known. In the dream, he looked at her with genuine affection, his touch gentle as he tucked her hair behind her ear. "None of it was real," she told him in the dream. "You never loved me." Dream Wesley smiled sadly. Would it matter if part of it was real? She woke with tears on her face, angry at her subconscious for creating that fictional moment of doubt. There had been no love, no genuine affection, only calculation and greed. She wouldn't allow herself to believe otherwise, not even in dreams. The trial date was set for January, 5 months away. The prosecutors were methodically building their case, adding charges as new evidence emerged. The outlook was promising, but the waiting felt interminable to Sloane. She wanted closure, needed to put this chapter of her life firmly behind her. "You've done everything right," Dr. Reynolds assured her during a session in late September. "You've secured your safety, cooperated with authorities, and focused on healing. Now, the legal system needs time to work." "And in the meantime?" Sloane asked, frustration edging her voice. "In the meantime, you live, you rebuild. You remind yourself every day that you survived not just their plot, but the discovery of it. That kind of betrayal breaks many people. It didn't break you." Taking this advice to heart, Sloane made a conscious decision to reclaim areas of her life that fear had restricted. She began dining out again, accepting social invitations, even considering dating, though the thought still filled her with apprehension. "Baby steps," her friend Madeline encouraged over lunch at their favorite restaurant. "No one expects you to jump back into the dating pool immediately. Or ever," Sloane replied with a wry smile. "I'm not sure I have the best judgment in that department." "Nonsense. Your judgment is excellent. That's why you're alive. You sensed something was wrong and you acted on it. Most people would have dismissed their suspicions, especially with someone as apparently devoted as Wesley was." Madeline's words stayed with Sloane, germinating slowly in her mind. Perhaps her friend was right. Her instincts hadn't failed her. They had saved her. She had noticed the inconsistencies, investigated her suspicions, and orchestrated an elaborate counter-strategy that had brought down 2 skilled criminals. That evening, alone in her penthouse, Sloane opened the safe hidden behind a painting in her office, a security measure installed after the arrests. Inside lay the engagement ring Wesley had offered that fateful night, secured as evidence and recently returned by the prosecution, who had documented it thoroughly for trial. The diamond caught the light, throwing rainbow prisms across the wall. Once, it would have represented a future, a promise of love and partnership. Now it symbolized nothing but deceit. Yet Sloane found herself strangely calm as she studied it. The ring held no power over her emotions anymore. She closed the safe, decision made. Tomorrow, she would have the ring appraised and sold, donating the proceeds to an organization supporting victims of fraud and exploitation. Something good would come from Wesley's final manipulation, even if that hadn't been his intention. As October dawned, bringing crisp air and turning leaves, Sloane felt something shifting within her, a gradual lightening, as if heavy weights were being incrementally removed from her shoulders. The nightmares came less frequently. The phantom sensation of Wesley's hands around her throat faded. The reflexive checking of food and drink became less compulsive. She was healing, not just physically, but emotionally. The betrayal would always be part of her story, but increasingly, it was becoming just that, a chapter rather than the entire narrative. "You're looking well," Detective Moss commented when they met to review her testimony for the upcoming trial. "Stronger." "I feel stronger," Sloane acknowledged, ready to face them in court. Detective Moss nodded approvingly. "They expected you to be an easy target. Wealthy, recently bereaved, socially isolated. They never anticipated you would fight back so effectively." "Neither did I," Sloane admitted, "but my grandmother always said adversity reveals character. I guess she was right." "She'd be proud of you," the detective said, surprising Sloane with the personal comment. Later that week, Yvette called with news that sent shockwaves through Sloane's carefully reconstructed calm. Wesley's made a deal with prosecutors in exchange for testimony against Brielle and information about their previous victims. "What kind of deal?" Sloane demanded, her knuckles white around the phone. "Nothing dramatic. 30 years instead of life without parole. He'll still die in prison, most likely." But here's the interesting part. He's claiming Brielle was the mastermind all along, that she's manipulated him for years, that he genuinely had feelings for you and tried to minimize the poisoning. Sloane's laugh held no humor. "That's absurd. He was choking me when the police arrived." "Of course it's absurd," Yvette agreed. "It's his last attempt to rewrite the narrative, to cast himself as less monstrous. Classic narcissistic behavior. Do the prosecutors believe him? Not remotely. They're using his testimony tactically, leveraging the rift between the defendants, but they wanted you prepared in case his claims become public." The gray October sky mirrored Sloane's mood as she stepped out of her car in front of the courthouse. 6 months had passed since that fateful Sunday when she had turned the tables on Wesley and Brielle. 6 months of healing, rebuilding, and preparing for this day, the first day of trial. She paused, taking in the imposing stone building with its classical columns and broad steps. Somewhere inside, Wesley and Brielle, or rather, Eric and Vanessa, waited in separate holding areas, their futures hanging in the balance. So did hers, in a different way. Today marked the beginning of closure, the first step toward putting this chapter firmly behind her. Yvette appeared beside her, elegant in a charcoal suit. "Ready?" Sloane nodded, squaring her shoulders. "Ready." They ascended the steps together, passing through security and navigating the crowded hallways to the designated courtroom. Despite Yvette's best efforts to keep Sloane's arrival discreet, murmurs of recognition followed them. The case had captured public attention. The wealthy tech heiress, the charming con man, the elaborate poisoning plot. It read like fiction, except Sloane had lived every horrifying moment of it. The courtroom was already filling when they entered. Sloane took her seat behind the prosecution table, her gaze fixed straight ahead, refusing to search the room for Wesley's face. She had prepared extensively for this moment with both Yvette and Dr. Reynolds, developing strategies to maintain her composure when confronted with the man who had so thoroughly betrayed her. Remember, Dr. Reynolds had advised during their final session before the trial, he will likely try to establish eye contact to create a sense of connection. You don't owe him that. Your only obligation is to yourself and to the truth. A hush fell over the courtroom as a side door opened and the defendants were led in, separately and under heavy guard. Despite her resolve, Sloane's breath caught when Wesley appeared. He looked thinner, the expensive suits replaced by standard-issue clothing that somehow failed to diminish his innate elegance. His eyes immediately sought hers, just as Dr. Reynolds had predicted. Sloane held his gaze for precisely 3 seconds, her expression neutral, then deliberately turned her attention to her notes. No emotion, no reaction, nothing he could interpret or manipulate. She sensed rather than saw his disappointment at being denied the response he sought. Brielle entered next, her transformation even more striking. Without her carefully applied makeup and designer clothes, she appeared older, harder, the sophisticated facade stripped away to reveal the calculating woman beneath. Unlike Wesley, she didn't look at Sloane at all, her eyes fixed on some middle distance, as if none of this were quite real to her. The proceedings began with opening statements, the prosecutor methodically outlining the state's case against both defendants. The evidence was presented chronologically, beginning with their arrival in the city under false identities, continuing through their calculated targeting of Sloane, detailing the financial manipulation, and culminating in the poisoning attempts and final confrontation. Through it all, Sloane maintained her composure, her expression revealing nothing even as the prosecutor displayed photographs of her during her illness, pale, gaunt, dark circles beneath her eyes, alongside her medical records documenting elevated levels of arsenic and digitalis. The defendants engaged in a methodical, premeditated attempt to murder Ms. Calloway after systematically defrauding her of millions, the prosecutor concluded. Their goal was simple: marry her, kill her, inherit everything. Only Ms. Calloway's extraordinary vigilance and courage prevented them from succeeding. The defense attorneys took their turns next, offering predictably divergent narratives. Wesley's lawyer portrayed him as manipulated by his domineering partner, genuinely conflicted about the poisoning, a man who had lost his moral compass but found his heart too late to save himself from her machinations. Brielle's attorney countered by depicting her as a victim of Wesley's coercion and psychological control, forced to participate in his schemes through fear and dependency. Sloane listened to these competing fictions with a detached fascination. Both were attempting to minimize their client's culpability by shifting blame to the other, exactly as Detective Moss had predicted they would. Neither narrative acknowledged the most fundamental truth. Both had participated willingly, enthusiastically even, in a plot to end her life. The first day of testimony focused on establishing the defendants' true identities and criminal histories. Forensic accountants detailed the complex web of financial transfers designed to siphon money from Sloane's accounts. Detective Moss testified about the surveillance operation and dramatic arrest at Brielle's apartment. Through it all, Sloane remained steady, her attention focused, her reactions controlled. Only when they played the audio recording from that night, Wesley's voice transforming from loving to threatening, his admission of their unfortunate decline plan for her, the sounds of struggle as he attacked her, did she allow herself to close her eyes briefly, centering herself with the breathing techniques Dr. Reynolds had taught her. When court adjourned for the day, Yvette squeezed her shoulder. "You did wonderfully," she murmured. "The jury couldn't take their eyes off you. Dignified, composed, exactly the opposite of how the defense wants to portray you." Sloane nodded, gathering her belongings. "One day down. The hardest is yet to come," Yvette reminded her gently. "Your testimony tomorrow." "I'm ready," Sloane replied, and she meant it. After months of preparation, after living through the actual events, testifying seemed almost anticlimactic. What could be more difficult than surviving the betrayal itself? That evening, in the quiet of her penthouse, Sloane reviewed her notes one final time, ensuring every detail was fresh in her mind. She slept surprisingly well, waking refreshed and clear-headed. Whatever happened in that courtroom today, she was prepared. Taking the witness stand the following morning, Sloane felt an unexpected calm settle over her. She stated her name and occupation for the record, was sworn in, and faced the prosecutor with steady eyes. "Ms. Calloway, please tell the court how you first met the defendant, Wesley Thorne, known to you at that time as Wesley Thorne." Sloane recounted their meeting at the charity gala, the whirlwind romance that followed, the gradual introduction of Brielle into their lives. She described the Sunday dinners that became tradition, the slow onset of mysterious symptoms, her growing suspicions. "When did you first suspect you were being poisoned?" the prosecutor asked. "I didn't immediately suspect poisoning," Sloane replied honestly. "At first, I thought it might be stress, or perhaps an allergic reaction. It was only after the third severe episode, when I noticed the consistent timing related to our visits to Brielle's apartment, that I began to consider more sinister possibilities." She described the medical tests, the discovery of toxins in her system, and finally, the moment that confirmed her suspicions, finding Brielle's text message on Wesley's phone. "Idiot, you switched the cups. What did you do with this information, Ms. Calloway?" "I sought legal counsel from attorney Yvette Dunham. Together, we developed a strategy to gather evidence while ensuring my safety. We involved Detective Moss and Dr. Littman, a toxicologist who confirmed the presence of arsenic and digitalis in my system." Step by step, Sloane walked the court through her counter-operation, the recording devices, the sample collection methods, the final confrontation, where she had convinced Brielle to take the poisoned cup, triggering the revelations that led to their arrest. Throughout her testimony, she kept her gaze directed at the prosecutor or the jury, never allowing herself to look directly at Wesley or Brielle. She could feel Wesley's eyes on her, intense, calculating, but she denied him the satisfaction of her acknowledgement. The cross-examinations were predictably aggressive. Wesley's attorney attempted to suggest that Sloane had misinterpreted innocent actions, that her illness might have been caused by other factors, that she had orchestrated an elaborate entrapment scheme against his client. "Ms. Calloway, isn't it true that you stood to gain significantly from Mr. Thorne's arrest? That his business was in competition with your company's real estate division?" "No," Sloane replied firmly. "That's completely false. Wesley's supposed development company barely existed. It was primarily a front for his fraudulent activities. There was no legitimate business competition." Brielle's attorney took a different approach, portraying Sloane as a vindictive woman jealous of her boyfriend's close relationship with his sister. "Isn't it possible, Ms. Calloway, that your suspicions about Ms. Thorne stemmed from your resentment of her influence over your boyfriend?" "No," Sloane answered, her voice level. "My suspicions stemmed from the fact that I became violently ill after consuming beverages she prepared, and from finding concrete evidence of their plot in text messages, financial records, and eventually, their own confessions." Hour after hour, she parried their attempts to discredit her testimony, her responses clear and concise, her recollection of events unwavering. When she finally stepped down from the witness stand, Yvette gave her a subtle nod of approval. She had done exactly what she needed to do. The trial continued for 3 weeks, a parade of expert witnesses, forensic evidence, and testimony from investigators. Dr. Littman explained the effects of chronic arsenic and digitalis poisoning in clinical detail. Financial experts traced the complex money trails. Law enforcement officers from other jurisdictions testified about similar cases involving the defendants under different identities. The most dramatic moment came when Wesley took the stand in his own defense, against his attorney's advice. Impeccably groomed despite his detention, he spoke with the same charismatic confidence that had once charmed Sloane. "I loved Sloane," he claimed, his voice catching with what seemed like genuine emotion. "Yes, I entered her life with ulterior motives. Yes, I participated in financial fraud. But when I fell in love with her, everything changed. I tried to protect her from Vanessa's more extreme plans. The prosecutor's cross-examination was ruthless. If you were trying to protect Ms. Calloway, Mr. Caldwell, why did we find your fingerprints on the bottle of Digitalis compound in Ms. Mercer's apartment? Why did your bank records show you purchasing arsenic compounds through an offshore account? Why, most damning of all, did you attempt to strangle Ms. Calloway when she confronted you with evidence of your crimes? Wesley's carefully constructed narrative crumbled under this onslaught of facts. His composed facade slipped, revealing flashes of the anger and calculation beneath. By the time he stepped down, his performance had likely done more harm than good to his case. Brielle chose not to testify, on advice of counsel. Her stony silence throughout the proceedings spoke volumes, her apparent disinterest in the outcome suggesting she had already accepted the inevitability of conviction. Finally, after 3 grueling weeks, the case went to the jury. Sloane waited with Yvette in a private conference room as deliberations extended from hours into days. "Is the length of deliberation concerning?" she asked on the 3rd day, pacing the small room. "Not necessarily," Yvette assured her. "The case is complex, with multiple charges against 2 defendants. The jury is being thorough, which generally favors the prosecution. They're taking their responsibility seriously." On the 4th day, word came. The jury had reached a verdict. Sloane returned to the courtroom, her heart racing despite her outward calm. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Not just the trial, but the months of recovery, the psychological work, the rebuilding of her life. The courtroom fell silent as the jury filed in. The foreman handed the verdict forms to the judge, who reviewed them before returning them for announcement. "On the count of conspiracy to commit murder in the 1st degree, how do you find the defendant, Eric Caldwell, also known as Wesley Thorne? Guilty. On the count of attempted murder in the 1st degree? Guilty. Charge after charge, count after count. The verdicts came in. Guilty on all counts for both defendants. Fraud, identity theft, financial crimes, attempted murder. The full weight of their actions recognized and condemned by 12 ordinary citizens who had listened to the evidence and seen the truth. Wesley's face remained impassive, though Sloane caught the slight tightening of his jaw, the only indication that the verdict had affected him at all. Brielle closed her eyes briefly before resuming her blank stare at nothing. Sentencing would come later, but the outcome was essentially determined by the verdict. Life imprisonment for both, with no possibility of parole. Their reign of calculated cruelty had finally ended. Outside the courthouse, beneath a sky that had cleared to brilliant blue, Sloane faced a crowd of reporters with Yvette at her side. Camera flashes created a strobe effect as she stepped to the microphones. "Justice was served today," she said simply. "Not just for me, but for all the victims who came before me. I'm grateful to the prosecution team, to law enforcement, and to the jury for their careful consideration of the evidence." "What's next for you, Ms. Calloway?" a reporter called out. Sloane smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes for perhaps the first time in public since the ordeal began. "Life," she replied. "My company, my friends, my future, all the things they tried to take from me." As the questions continued, Sloane felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, the final release of a burden she had carried for almost a year. The danger had passed. Justice had been served. The nightmare was over. In the weeks that followed, Sloane embraced this new chapter with the same determination that had saved her life. She implemented the comprehensive security protocols Yvette had recommended, not from fear, but from wisdom. She continued her sessions with Dr. Reynolds, working through the lingering trauma. She recommitted herself to Calloway Tech, launching innovative projects that honored her grandmother's legacy while establishing her own vision. 3 months after the verdict, on a crisp winter evening, Sloane hosted a small gathering at her penthouse, the first social event she had organized since before meeting Wesley. Her closest friends, Yvette, Detective Moss, Dr. Littman, and other key people who had supported her through the ordeal, gathered to celebrate not just her legal victory, but her personal one. As conversation and laughter filled her home, Sloane stepped onto her balcony for a moment of quiet reflection. The city spread before her, lights twinkling against the darkening sky. Somewhere in those lights were other potential victims, other schemes being plotted, other betrayals in progress. But there were also people like Detective Moss and Yvette Dunham working to prevent them, to bring justice when prevention failed. She thought of the red cup, such a simple object, yet it had become the focal point of a plot to end her life, and ultimately, the key to saving it. She had kept it as a reminder, not of betrayal, but of her own resilience. It sat on a shelf in her office now, alongside a framed photo of her grandmother, twin symbols of the strength that defined the Calloway women. A soft knock on the balcony door drew her attention. Yvette stood there, holding 2 champagne flutes. "A toast?" she suggested, joining Sloane at the railing. Sloane accepted the glass with a smile. "What are we toasting to?" Yvette considered for a moment. "To new beginnings, to survival, to justice, to wisdom," Sloane added softly, "and to recognizing the difference between what seems to be and what truly is." They clinked glasses, the crystal ringing clear in the night air. As Sloane sipped the champagne, a vintage her grandmother had loved, she felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. She had faced the darkest kind of betrayal and emerged not just alive, but stronger, wiser, more fully herself. The future stretched before her, unmarred by shadows of the past. There would be challenges, certainly. Running Calloway Tech, navigating the occasional publicity resurgence when Wesley and Brielle's crimes were referenced in the media, perhaps even venturing back into the dating world someday. But she would face each challenge with the knowledge that she had survived the worst already. She had looked into the face of betrayal, recognized it for what it was, and refused to be its victim. She had switched the cups, literally and metaphorically, turning a death sentence into salvation. As she rejoined her guests, moving from conversation to conversation, Sloane caught glimpses of her reflection in the windows. Straightened shoulders, clear eyes, a natural smile. She looked like herself again, but not exactly the same woman who had met Wesley Thorne at that charity gala 14 months ago. This version of Sloane Calloway was tested, tempered, unbreakable. The red cup had been meant as her undoing. Instead, it had become the vessel of her transformation, from target to survivor, from victim to victor. Some might have been broken by such betrayal, might have retreated into isolation and fear. Sloane had chosen a different path, reclaiming not just her life, but her power to define it on her own terms. Outside, the city continued its rhythmic pulse of light and life. Inside, surrounded by genuine connections and authentic support, Sloane raised her glass once more, this time in a silent toast to herself, to the woman who had refused to become just another tragic headline, who had turned the tables on those who sought to destroy her. The switched cups had changed everything, not in the way Wesley and Brielle had planned, but in a way that honored the legacy of strength, intelligence, and determination that was Sloane Calloway's birthright. In the end, they had underestimated her in every possible way, and that miscalculation had been their downfall and her salvation. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.